My name is Professor Ian Williamson, and I have the great privilege of serving as the Dean of the Paul Merage School of Business at the University of California, Irvine. Welcome to another session of the Dean's Thought Leaders Seminar. We have with us today a fantastic guest, Mr. Nick Tran, who's the head of marketing globally for TikTok. He's also been vice president for marketing at Hulu and has had senior leadership positions in marketing at Stance, Samsung, and Taco Bell. However, most importantly for this conversation, he's also the University of California, Irvine Paul Merage School alumni. It's always great when we can see our great alums doing fantastic things. Thank you very much for joining us, Nick.
Of course.
So listen, it's really a pleasure to have you. You've been doing some amazing work with really some innovative companies. And I guess this first question is all about innovation. It really is thinking back over the last 18 to 24 months. The world has seen stuff that we've never really seen before.
Yeah.
The word that oftentimes is used is disruption. And I'd be curious to get your sense as to how your organization, TikTok in this situation, has been disrupted or perhaps has been a disruptor. And what are the learnings you've taken from this last 18 to 24 months as a leader in marketing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say if you actually think about TikTok, there wasn't much that we had to do because it was the type of business or service that was going to flourish in this situation that we've never seen before anyways. Similar to when I was at Hulu, we saw such a big rise in consumption behaviors because people were at home more often that there wasn't much of a pivot that these companies had to make. I think it was more so future-proofing them to withstand what comes after these big surges. A couple areas that we did disrupt and innovate though came from insights that we saw during the pandemic. So to start with, live streaming became a big need for many companies and individuals and people to really explore. And we definitely increased our appetite to invest into the live streaming space.
Got it.
I'd also say that some of the innovations didn't come from TikTok from the beginning. It actually came from the community. So we saw that a lot of people were looking to find jobs using TikTok.
Oh.
So out of that, we created this thing called TikTok Resumes that allowed people to actually apply to a job and work with 42 different brands that were on our platform, where they said, like, you don't need a resume for this job. You could submit a TikTok video and have that be your application.
Yeah.
So again, there's so many things that have happened over the last 18 months. I'd say that the innovation really came from the community. And ultimately, industries that I think really had to make harder pivots than we did. I'm looking at like the beauty industry. I saw Instacart really flourish when they were like kind of near, difficult times.
Yeah.
And a few other companies that really had that opportunity to pivot. But yeah, it's been amazing to see some of the most revered brands take that step in the right direction.
I'm really intrigued by this notion that you had to look to the community because it suggests that you were putting your ear to the ground and really listening and watching what your clients and customers were doing. But equally true, you had to have something inside the organization that allowed you to respond to that insight. So I think a lot of times companies get the insight, but they're not set up to respond. What allowed you to respond?
Yeah, I'd say a lack of red tape and process because most people don't realize TikTok is a 3-year-old company.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you'd expect for a company of our size to already be embedded into the culture or the process of the company. We didn't necessarily have that. So you're dealing with a situation where you have an appetite for disruption and innovation. You have a lot of flexibility into the process, which allowed us to pivot in the midst of all this stuff and determine what we had to do in order to get something out the door and shipped. And ultimately, that included taking a typical campaign process at other companies that would be about 2 to 3 months and truncate that down to a 72-hour time frame where we see things happening. To your point, we have our ear to the ground, and then we take that initiative to say, like, okay, if we don't have the time and the luxury that other companies do to take this to market, and we only have this amount of time, what steps do we need to do, and what do we need to eliminate from like some of these legacy processes that would allow us to really bring this to life in a more, dynamic and quick way? And it turned out that there's a lot of stuff that's just not necessary in today's marketing world that you can actually eliminate and truly market at the speed of culture.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love that, marketing at the speed of culture.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you've talked a little bit about how TikTok has responded, but I'd be curious to get your sense as to what the last 18 months or so has meant for you in terms of leadership.
Yeah.
You personally having to lead an organization in that period of time. What did you find out about yourself as a leader, or what did you sort of notice about leadership more broadly as you think about what you've observed?
Yeah, I think first thing to note is that I joined a month into the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And because of that, there's a whole group of individuals on my team that I've never met in person. So I think the first realization is that leading a global organization and not being able to travel has its pros and cons. On one hand, I've been able to spend more time with my family, and I would think that the team was able to spend more time with their families. But on the flip side, there's a lot of collaboration that tends to happen when you're in a room with somebody that we weren't able to do over the last 18 months, and you'd have to try to do things through video conference. I think during this time, though, I found that as I've matured in my leadership style, the idea of empathy, which a lot of people talk about, has been, I guess, more true now than ever before. And what I talked to the team about is, for the first time, you're getting a window into people's lives and who they are outside of like the work environment. Because never before have I been able to see someone's dog or cat pop into like the meeting, or their kids run by like yelling things. And I think getting a window into people's lives allows you to see them as not just a colleague or a coworker or a person responsible for these things at a company, but you're seeing who they are behind all that, which has been such an amazing opportunity that makes me think differently about how we operate. And it has become a little bit more of like a familial vibe that I don't think I necessarily would have had it not been for the last 18 months.
It is quite amazing how in an environment where we weren't together, we actually personalized individuals more.
Yep.
And that's really quite phenomenal to kind of see how this is all played out. Yeah, empathy. I think that's one of the biggest words that I think a lot of, I hear leaders talking about the criticality of that in this environment.
Yeah.
So we continue to see calls. I think another interesting outcome of this whole period has been we're seeing calls from society for businesses and business leaders to play a very active role in dealing with major social issues, everything from poverty to social justice to inclusion. And I really would love to get your sense as to what you think are the responsibilities of business and business leaders to this call, to this expectation of society is now placing very clearly on organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The way that I think about it is a business leader's main responsibility is the business technically. And whether it's to shareholders or if it's a private company, to the board or whoever it is, like you have a responsibility to ensure that the company and the business is successful. I think the great opportunity that we as business leaders have today is that for the first time, you actually see an alignment between what's going to make the business succeed with what society actually is like looking for. So in the sense of diversity and inclusion, in terms of social justice and things along those lines, you're dealing with a generation of consumers that actually value businesses that prioritize those initiatives. So if you're a business that is actually, focused and has a value system that's going to drive a lot of those initiatives forward, you are more likely to win than a business that doesn't have those as part of their mission or their value or their brand proposition or different things that are like inherent to the company structure. I think that as we move forward, though, it'll be interesting to see which areas society or this generation really prioritizes, because we've been hearing things like climate change being a priority, to your point, social justice, diversity, inclusion. Certain things are just going to become table stakes, and it's not going to be differentiated for a business to step up and say, like, we believe in these things, because I think if you don't stand up and say those things, you're going to have bigger backlash. But I think as we start to see different themes or areas of importance pop up from this new generation, businesses will then have to make a choice, like, do I focus on climate change and social justice, or do I focus on one or the other, or is there a possibility for me to like be all encompassing? And I think as we continue to see the landscape, more businesses will be able to bring some of those elements internally to life, but what they express externally will be really interesting to see how they navigate that over the next few years.
I think that's a very good point. I wonder how, as an educator, how we are able to best train the current and future leaders to truly embrace what you're talking about, that there's a clear overlap now between this sort of broader legitimacy expectation, which has some economic component to it, but oftentimes doesn't. It's just this is an expectation. And then the other expectation of a business leader to actually lead a successful business. And this is the space that I think we have oftentimes not focused on educating people to do, or if we've done it in separation, and now more and more it has to be part of the holistic story.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many brands over the last few years have missteps, and everyone talks about, the other side of the pendulum, which is like cancel culture. Yeah. So like when a company has a misstep and then they get canceled, there's meaningful impact to their business. So the only way to avoid that isn't to just react or avoid those pitfalls. It's to bake in these the mission and the values inherently, so that if you do have a misstep, people give you that pass because they know that that wasn't the intent. Yeah. Because I think the brands that don't build a belief system or a mission or values driven, element within their brand, when they do have a moment where they take a hit, it's going to be significantly more impactful than the companies where people recognize that like that was just truly a misstep. Yeah. They recognize that the company's doing a lot of other things, and because of that, they're going to afford them that moment to reconnect with the audience and understand what the issues were and to come back stronger. And that's where it's the only way to hedge in this environment where there is a lot of folks that are instantly looking to cancel things.
Yeah, I think the investment in goodwill has never generated a better return.
Never, ever before.
That's great. Last question.
Okay.
If you have advice for our current students, or maybe even some of our future students, in terms of preparing themselves to lead successful organizations going forward, what would you tell them to prepare themselves for, and how would you recommend they do that preparation?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I'd say, I don't know if there's a overarching thing. I think everyone has their own path to take, and I can speak to my experience pretty easily, and I've seen examples from other people that I respect and admire. And what I noticed is that there isn't necessarily one path or approach to leading organizations. I think each organization has its own DNA, and how you sort of like thread through that either makes you successful or less successful. A couple of the elements that I have seen that have been interesting as like themes or consistent traits that I see in other folks, in my circle. One, it's really been this idea of perseverance. I think nobody has had an easy path to get to the top, or whatever you want to claim the top is. And the folks that are able to navigate through that, take some of the challenges or shortcomings from previous experiences and use that as stepping stones to take a bigger opportunity. Those folks have always tended to do better, whether they're entrepreneurs or whether they're like business leaders. Because again, nobody has like a flawless career path, right? So you have to be able to persevere through those elements. I also think that I've noticed this trend where more recently than before, friends of mine who've been able to take top positions at other companies, they set themselves apart by being truly passionate about that business. Like I can tell you definitively, I love TikTok. Like I love the product, I love the community, I love the creators, I love the feeling that people have when they are on TikTok for a little bit of time. Like you see them coming out of the experience a little bit happier than they were before. And that's something that we really strive for. If you were to talk to somebody that's at a company, let's say like at a Nike, another brand that I love, the person that's truly passionate about the product, sport, the community at large, like they're going to win and they're going to do successful things for that company, that brand, because they just live it every day, as opposed to somebody who just is a student of that industry and kind of like sat passively on the sidelines and learned. I don't think you're going to see as much of that moving forward, because there's just so many things that people are passionate about that you're going to find someone that's just as capable and just as qualified, but their edge is going to be knowing that in and out, and knowing like, the communities and how to navigate and all the right influencers in the space and do well in that regard. So I just really think the people that can persevere and are passionate are going to be more likely to step into those roles. So just find the thing that you love, focus on that. I knew I loved marketing. Yeah. So I think I might have told you before, but like one of the quarters that I had at Mirage, I was taking 5 classes because that's the only time that specific course was going to be available. I was auditing 2, and so it was a total of 7 classes that I was taking. And in the classes that I was auditing, I quickly found that you don't have to read all the material because as an auditor, you're not required to participate.
Yeah.
And in those classes, I went to Amazon and I looked at the recommended books that were separate from the books that were on the syllabus because I knew that they were going to cover all that in the discussions. And if I was attending all the discussions, I would know what that book was about. So I would actually read other books that were complementary to those books. So essentially, I felt like I was taking 9 courses in marketing in a quarter here because I just loved it that much.
Yeah.
And I continue to this day to feel that I'm a student of the marketing game, and I learned from so many people. And if you're always learning and you're always striving to be a little bit better than you were the day before, and you take the initiative to like take 7 classes because you love it, how are you going to lose to anyone else?
Yeah.
Like no one's going to put that amount of effort or time than you would if you love it that much. So I would just say, like, don't do what you think looks best, and don't try to prove to the industry or to others that you've earned their respect. Just do what you love, and you will set yourself apart from everyone else pretty easily.
Fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Well, Nick, it's a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for taking the
Yeah,
time.
anytime.
And it's fantastic to see what you're doing, and we just look forward to see all the other great accomplishments you have coming forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.